Friends, if you want to watch a super hit and heart-touching movie like War Room 2015 in English, then make sure to like this video right now. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our family where we talk about amazing movies, reviews, and a lot of interesting behind-the-scenes facts. In today's video, we're diving into a powerful, emotional, and thought-provoking film called War Room. This is not just any movie. It's a film that will touch your heart, make you think, and possibly even inspire you in your own life. So what exactly is War Room? What is the story all about? Where can you watch it right now? And on which OTT platform or satellite TV channel will you find it? We are going to answer all these questions in this video. And that's not all. I'll also share some amazing behind-the-scenes facts, production details, and insights into how this film came to life. From its humble beginnings to its wide release, from the vision of the filmmakers to the message it delivers, everything will be discussed right here. We'll explore the technical department, who handled the camera work, how the lighting and editing added to the emotional weight of the story. We'll talk about the music, the background score that elevates the dramatic moments and adds depth to the story. Then we'll move on to pre-production, how the idea was developed, the casting process, and the hard work that went into planning each scene. We'll also take a look at the actual filming, where it was shot, how the scenes were created, and what made the production smooth and successful. Not just that, we'll get into post-production, how the film was edited, polished, and made ready for the big screen. We'll talk about the budget, how much was spent to bring this vision to life, and how much it earned at the box office, which will definitely surprise many of you because this film did much better than what many expected. Then, of course, comes the story. I'll give you a short but complete review of what the movie is about. No major spoilers, don't worry. Just enough to give you an idea of how moving and meaningful the story really is. We'll also talk about the performances. Which actor played which character, how their acting left an impact, and who really stood out in the film. And if that wasn't enough, we'll go even further and talk about some lesser-known facts about War Room. Things that even some fans might not know, like what inspired the story, how the cast prepared for their roles, and what kind of response the film received from audiences and critics around the world. So friends, I request you to stay with us till the end of this video, because this is going to be an entertaining and informative ride through the world of War Room. A film that proves that even in the middle of life's toughest battles, faith, prayer, and love can be the most powerful weapons. Let's begin the video. Alright friends, let's dive into the story of War Room. And let me tell you, this is not your regular popcorn flick with action scenes and dramatic chases. No, War Room is a battle of a different kind. One that takes place within the walls of a home, a marriage, and a heart. The movie kicks off in a pretty familiar setting. The life of a married couple, Tony and Elizabeth Jordan. On the surface, they seem to have it all. A nice house, good jobs, and a beautiful daughter. But scratch beneath that shiny surface and you'll see the cracks. Oh boy, the cracks are everywhere. Tony is successful, yes, but arrogant and self-centered. Elizabeth is holding on, barely. The love is fading, arguments are routine, and their daughter is caught in the middle, watching everything fall apart. Now here's where it gets interesting. The story doesn't go for any flashy tricks. No jumping back and forth in time, no mysterious voiceovers, no confusing flashbacks. It sticks to a straight, clear path. But it makes you feel every single moment with such intensity that you don't need any of those storytelling gimmicks. And then comes a twist. Not a big shocking reveal, but a quiet, powerful one. Elizabeth meets Miss Clara. And Miss Clara, let me tell you, is the secret ingredient of this whole dish. She's a feisty, wise, no-nonsense older woman who introduces Elizabeth to something she never expected. The power of prayer. But not just any prayer. Strategic, passionate, spiritual warfare-level prayer. The kind of prayer you don't do casually on the way to work, but one that happens in a literal war room. A closet emptied out and turned into a private prayer battlefield. This is where the movie shifts gears. Elizabeth starts praying, not arguing. She starts fighting for her family, not with her family. And Tony, who's out there messing up his professional and personal life, begins to feel the impact. The turning point. It's not some dramatic car crash or sudden illness. It's the invisible, slow-burning transformation of a man's heart. And when Tony's career takes a nosedive because of his own actions, That's when the dominoes start to fall. He's forced to face himself, really face himself, for the first time in a long time. And while all this is happening, we get to see the ripple effects. His daughter starts noticing the changes. Elizabeth gains confidence and peace. And Miss Clara. She's like the coach on the sidelines, cheering Elizabeth on with that fierce grandmotherly wisdom. The emotional punches don't come with loud music or big speeches. They come in small, quiet moments. A heartfelt apology. Sincere prayer. A broken man asking for forgiveness. The drama is real, but it's all wrapped in warmth and hope. There's humor too. Surprisingly enough, Miss Clara delivers some sharp, funny lines that keep things light even when the emotions run deep. And thematically, it hits hard. This film is all about priorities, purpose, and perseverance. It's about letting go of control and trusting something bigger than yourself. It challenges the idea that shouting the loudest fixes anything. Instead, it shows you that sometimes silence, faith, and inner strength are the real game changers. So while the story might look simple on paper, a woman prays for her crumbling marriage and things begin to change. The way it unfolds is anything but simple. It's layered with emotion, filled with heart, and packed with scenes that stick with you long after the credits roll. This is a war movie, but instead of bullets and bombs, it's got prayers and perseverance. And trust me, that's just as intense. Let's talk about the characters in War Room, because if the story is the heart of the movie, the characters are definitely its soul. And what a set of characters we've got. Each one feels like someone you could actually meet in real life. No superheroes, no larger-than-life drama kings and queens. Just real people with real problems trying to hold it together in a world that's pulling them apart. Let's start with Elizabeth Jordan. She's the core of the film, and from the very beginning, you can feel her stress, her frustration, and her exhaustion. She's not the kind of person who screams or throws dishes when things go wrong. She internalizes it. She bottles it up and tries to keep the peace, which makes her character instantly relatable. But she's also stuck. She doesn't just want to save her marriage. She wants to feel like she matters in her own home. Her journey isn't loud or dramatic. It's internal, emotional, and beautifully subtle. And when Miss Clara comes into the picture, Elizabeth begins one of the most meaningful transformations you'll see on screen. She moves from passive and weary to active and spiritually fierce, and it's not a magical switch. It's a hard-fought, deeply personal evolution. You cheer for her because you see the work she's putting in. Now let's bring in Tony Jordan. Oh, Tony. He starts off as the kind of guy you want to roll your eyes at. Arrogant, self-absorbed, thinks he's God's gift to the corporate world. He's that dad who's more focused on closing deals and flexing his muscles than connecting with his family. At first, you might even wonder why Elizabeth is holding on. But here's where the film gets you. Tony is not just a villain. He's lost. He's broken in ways he hasn't admitted to himself yet. And when his world starts crumbling, when his job is threatened, when his lies catch up with him, that's when you see the cracks. And in those cracks, something honest starts to grow. His transformation isn't immediate, but it's sincere. He goes from being proud and defensive to humble and genuinely repentant. You feel every step of that journey, and when he begins to earn his way back into the trust of his wife and daughter, it's not just emotional. It's downright powerful. Then there's the MVP of the entire film, Miss Clara. Let's just call her the spiritual sniper. She's this elderly woman full of sass, wisdom, and zero tolerance for nonsense. She doesn't preach, she teaches. And she doesn't push Elizabeth into prayer. She pulls her in by example. Miss Clara has already been through the fire. She's fought battles, faced loss, and come out on the other side with fire in her belly and scripture in her back pocket. Her scenes are some of the most entertaining and impactful, and she adds this beautiful balance of humor, authority, and deep compassion. She's not just a mentor. She's the spark that ignites the entire story. Even the supporting characters like young Danielle, Tony and Elizabeth's daughter, are given their own emotional weight. She's not just the background kid playing with dolls. She watches. She listens. She feels the tension and silently reacts to the changes around her. When her parents start healing, You see the effect it has on her. And it's a subtle but powerful reminder that children are often the quietest victims of adult battles. And when the healing begins, they're the first ones to bloom. What makes the character development in War Room so good is that nobody stays the same. Everyone is on a journey, and none of it feels forced. The shifts are gradual, earned, and deeply human. These characters don't just go through change, they go through growth. Painful, hopeful, uplifting growth. Their motivations aren't just explained in words. They're shown through actions, expressions, and decisions. The relationships evolve with every scene. You see a cold, distant marriage slowly melt into something tender again. You see a father rediscover his role not just as a provider, but as a protector and nurturer. And you see a woman who once felt powerless step into her full strength, not by dominating anyone, but by choosing a path of faith and courage. So while there may not be a massive cast or epic world building, what War Room delivers is something just as impressive. Authentic characters with real journeys. Characters who start off broken, bitter, or blind, and end up better, braver, and beautifully human. Now let's talk about the performances in War Room, because let me tell you, this cast may not be filled with A-list Hollywood celebrities, but what they bring to the table is something far more valuable. Raw emotion, authenticity, and soul. These actors don't just play roles, they live them. They step into these everyday, relatable characters and give them a heartbeat. Let's start with Priscilla Shirer, who plays Elizabeth Jordan. Now, here's the real kicker. She's not a professional actress by trade. She's actually best known as a speaker and author, but you wouldn't guess that for a second while watching her in this film. From the very beginning, she embodies the character of Elizabeth with such sincerity that you immediately feel her pain, her confusion, and her exhaustion. She doesn't need big dramatic monologues to grab your attention. It's in the subtle eye movements, the way her voice tightens during an argument, or the moments of silence where her eyes do all the talking. As the story unfolds and Elizabeth transforms, Priscilla brings a quiet strength to the role that sneaks up on you. You watch her go from stressed and hopeless to powerful and prayerful, and she makes that entire arc believable. Every step of the way you're rooting for her. Now let's get to T.C. Stallings as Tony Jordan. Oh boy, does he bring fire to this role. In the beginning, you kind of want to throw a pillow at your screen every time he opens his mouth. He's smug, impatient, and full of himself, and TC plays it so well that you know he's not overacting. He's channeling the exact type of guy we've all seen somewhere in real life. But what really makes his performance stand out is the shift. Watching Tony's arrogance melt away and reveal a man full of regret, confusion, and longing for redemption is one of the most powerful parts of the film. TC nails that vulnerability without losing the strength of the character. He doesn't go soft, he grows. And it's that emotional honesty that makes his performance hit so hard. But wait, we absolutely cannot move forward without giving the biggest round of applause to Karen Abercrombie as Miss Clara. Oh yes, she steals every single scene she walks into. You know that character who walks into a room and instantly makes everyone sit up straighter? That's Miss Clara. Karen brings a mix of sass, wisdom, and holy authority that makes you want to rewind her scenes just to catch all her one-liners and spiritual mic drops. She's funny, she's fierce, and she's absolutely unforgettable. One minute she's telling Elizabeth off with a grin, the next she's storming the gates of heaven in prayer, and you believe every second of it. She doesn't just act, she commands the screen. If there were an award for Most Memorable Mentor, she'd win it hands down. And even the smaller roles shine. Alena Pitts, who plays the Jordan's daughter Danielle, delivers a sweet, natural performance. She's not over-rehearsed or fake. She reacts just like a real kid would. Her sadness when things fall apart and her cautious hope when they start healing. It all feels real. You feel for her, and that's because Alena doesn't try too hard. She just is that kid. And then you've got supporting characters like Michael Jr., who adds comic relief with just the right touch of charm and timing, keeping the film from ever feeling too heavy or one note. What's truly impressive is that many of these actors didn't come from long, glamorous film careers. They came with passion, belief in the story, and a desire to make it real, and it shows. There are moments in War Room where the performances are so emotionally intense, you forget you're watching a movie. It doesn't feel like they're acting, it feels like they're letting us peek into their lives. And that's the magic. They elevate the story not by being flashy or dramatic, but by being honest, raw, and deeply human. Now let's talk about the direction of War Room, because behind every powerful movie moment is a director calling the shots, setting the tone, and shaping the story like a sculptor with a vision. In this case, that visionary is Alex Kendrick. And if you've seen any of his other films, you know he's not just interested in telling a story. He wants to deliver a message, and he wants you to feel it. From the first frame, you can tell that Alex isn't going for blockbuster spectacle or flashy tricks. No. He's playing a long game, slow, steady, and sincere. His style is clean and intentional, and that's exactly what a film like War Room needs. He doesn't try to distract you with crazy camera angles or over-the-top visual effects. Instead, he pulls you into the characters' lives like you've stepped into their living room. He wants you to sit down, stay a while, and really see what's going on beneath the surface. The tone of the film is where Kendrick's direction really shines. It's serious without being depressing, spiritual without being preachy, and heartfelt without becoming syrupy. That balance is hard to pull off, but he does it. There are moments where the tension between Elizabeth and Tony feels so real, you could cut it with a knife. And then, just when it starts getting too heavy, in comes Miss Clara with a line that makes you chuckle and lifts the mood without breaking the flow. That's not luck, that's directorial instinct. And let's talk about pacing, because this is where some films fall flat. They either rush through emotional growth or drag scenes out forever. But here, Kendrick paces the story like a slow burn, and that's a compliment. He gives the characters time to breathe, to change, to struggle. He doesn't force the transformation. He lets it happen, naturally and gradually. The shifts in tone are smooth, from conflict to reflection, from prayer to confrontation. And when the big emotional moments arrive, they land with maximum impact because the groundwork has been laid. Now, the shot composition might not scream cinematic masterpiece at first glance. You're not going to get sweeping drone shots of mountains or 1,000 extras in dramatic lighting. But what you do get is focus. Literally. Kendrick often uses tight frames and intimate setups, especially during prayer scenes and one-on-one conversations. The camera moves in close, letting us see every emotion, every twitch, every tear. Feels personal. Like you're in that tiny war room closet with Elizabeth, or right across the table from Tony when he's trying to figure out where his life went off the rails. There's a particular stillness in those moments that draws you in and holds you there. Kendrick doesn't rush to the next scene. He waits, and in that pause the emotion builds. Stylistically, he also uses contrast really well. For example, in the early scenes, the Jordan home feels cold. Not physically, but emotionally. The lighting is a little flatter, the atmosphere a bit tense. But as the story progresses and healing begins, the scenes start to feel warmer and more vibrant. It's subtle, but it works like a visual heartbeat, matching the emotional arc of the film. And let's not forget the way Kendrick uses silence. Oh yes, silence. Not every director knows how to make silence feel powerful, but in War Room, there are moments where the quiet says more than dialogue ever could. A silent tear, a still face, a long pause after a prayer. These choices speak volumes. And don't think Kendrick isn't having fun either. He slips in humor with precision. The timing of Miss Clara's one-liners. Spot on. The little awkward family moments. Totally relatable. It never feels like comedy for the sake of laughs. It's more like life, where even in the middle of a mess, something funny always manages to sneak in. So, while Kendrick's direction might not be flashy, it's effective, heartfelt, and deliberate. He's not trying to impress with style. He's trying to connect through substance. And in a film like War Room, that makes all the difference. Every shot, every beat, every choice feels like part of a bigger purpose. To tell a story that sticks, stirs, and stays with you. Let's zoom in, literally, and talk about the cinematography in War Room. Now, this film might not be packed with sweeping drone shots over mountains or fancy special effects. But don't let that fool you. The camera work in War Room does something even better. It quietly sneaks into your heart and sets up camp there. The cinematography here isn't about being flashy. It's about being intentional. Every angle, every light choice, every frame is designed to pull you deeper into the emotional current of the story. Let's start with the camera angles. From the very beginning, you'll notice that this film likes to keep things tight. We're talking close-ups on faces during conversations, low-angle shots when tension is high, and slow pans during quiet, emotional moments. When Elizabeth is in conflict with Tony, the camera doesn't pull back and give them space. It closes in. Why? Because you're supposed to feel trapped too. You're in the middle of the storm. You're not just observing the argument, you're caught in the eye of it. That claustrophobic framing becomes even more powerful when Elizabeth steps into the war room. The camera practically crouches into that little closet with her, following her expressions, her tears, her whispered prayers. It's not just a set, it becomes sacred ground, and the cinematography treats it that way. Lighting plays a huge role in telling the story too. At the start of the film, the lighting in the Jordan house is soft but distant. There's a cool tone that reflects the coldness between Tony and Elizabeth. The house is beautiful but emotionally it feels dim. As Elizabeth begins to pray and change, and as Tony begins to transform, the lighting slowly shifts. It becomes warmer, more golden, more welcoming. That's not an accident. The filmmakers use lighting like a silent narrator, guiding your mood without ever saying a word. And it's not just indoors. Even the scenes at Tony's workplace or in the hallway with Danielle use contrast to emphasize tension or peace. When Tony's career starts crashing, notice how the brightness dims. His world literally gets darker, and the camera holds him in that gloom just long enough to make you squirm. And don't even get me started on the framing. There are so many beautiful little visual choices tucked throughout the movie. It's like finding hidden treasures. For example, when Elizabeth first sets up her war room, the framing is tight and cluttered. She's unsure, awkward, still figuring it out. But later in the film, when she's deep in prayer and fully committed, the framing changes. The camera pulls back just enough to show the walls covered in notes, scriptures, and prayers. It's not chaos anymore. It's organized passion. It's a visual representation of her internal growth. One of the standout moments visually is when Miss Clara prays in her own war room. The lighting is soft but radiant, and the camera moves slowly, respectfully. You feel like you're witnessing something holy. There's no dramatic music, no overacting, just the gentle hum of stillness, captured beautifully by the lens. Even during casual scenes like Elizabeth jogging or Tony sitting alone in his car, the cinematography finds ways to add emotional weight. A long, slow zoom on a character's face can say more than a paragraph of dialogue. The film knows when to be still, when to move, and when to wait. And when Tony kneels down in humility, the camera doesn't rush in. It lets the moment breathe. It holds the frame just long enough to make you feel it in your gut. And let's not ignore the use of shadows and light play. There's a scene where Tony's silhouette is cast on the wall during a crucial moment, and it's like a visual metaphor for his inner struggle. Another scene with Elizabeth in the kitchen shows the light pouring in behind her as she prays, like a subtle visual halo. It's quiet symbolism, but it packs a punch. So while the cinematography in War Room isn't loud, it's smart. It knows how to guide your eyes and your emotions without ever shouting for attention. The angles make you feel close. The lighting makes you feel the shift. And the framing makes you understand the journey, without a single word. It's the kind of visual storytelling that doesn't just show you what's happening. It makes you feel it one frame at a time. Let's talk about editing and pacing in War Room, because in a film like this, where emotion runs deep, conversations matter more than explosions, and the big battles happen in prayer closets, the rhythm of the story is everything. This isn't a race to the climax. It's a slow dance with transformation, and the editing has to keep that dance elegant, honest, and moving at just the right beat. From the get-go, the film sets a tone that says, "Take your time, we're going to walk through this together." And that's exactly what the editing supports. Scenes don't feel rushed, and they don't linger unnecessarily. The transitions between scenes are clean and smooth, allowing the story to unfold naturally, without any jarring jumps or confusing shifts. When Elizabeth goes from talking to Miss Clara in the living room to standing alone in her kitchen at night, the cuts feel like logical progressions, almost like chapters in a book, turning one page at a time. Now, this isn't a thriller, so don't expect rapid-fire editing or flashy montages every 5 minutes. What you get instead is thoughtful pacing that mirrors the characters' emotional journeys. When Elizabeth starts praying regularly in her war room, the editing slows down intentionally. It allows you to sit in those quiet moments, to hear the silence, to watch her expressions shift as she pours out her heart. Those scenes are cut with a kind of reverence, and it's exactly what they need. The editors knew not to chop them up or breeze past them. They knew the power was in the stillness. But the film doesn't drag either. That's the beauty of it. Whenever things start to feel heavy or too reflective, the editing picks up just enough to carry you to the next key moment. There's a rhythm here, almost like a wave. Tension builds in scenes between Elizabeth and Tony, and the editing keeps you on edge, cutting back and forth between their reactions just long enough to let the discomfort simmer. Then it cuts away. Not too fast, not too slow, just in time for you to exhale. The pacing knows when to push and when to pause. One of the clever things about the editing is how it builds parallel arcs. Elizabeth and Tony are going through different but connected journeys, and the editing weaves those paths together like a braid. You'll see Elizabeth deepening in faith while Tony is facing temptation or confronting his own ego. The cuts between their individual struggles and moments of reflection create a sense of unity. Even before they've reconciled, the film makes it clear that they're still connected. That's subtle storytelling through editing, and it works like magic. And let's talk about those prayer scenes. These could easily have felt repetitive or static. After all, how many times can you show someone in a small room talking to God, right? But here's where the editors shine. They know how to shape those scenes with variation. Sometimes it's a quick, whispered prayer and a cut to daily life. Other times it's a longer sequence, layered with soft music and flashes of the people being prayed for. And in a few powerful moments, they use montage editing to show progress, not just in Elizabeth's spiritual life, but in how her home begins to shift. You'll notice Danielle smiling more, Tony becoming more introspective, and the atmosphere changing, all through carefully selected cuts that keep you emotionally plugged in. Then there's the use of reaction shots. The editors give just the right amount of time to the characters' responses. Whether it's Miss Clara raising an eyebrow, Tony swallowing his pride, or Elizabeth blinking back tears, these aren't throwaway moments. They're key beats, and the film lets them breathe. Sometimes a pause before a line lands harder than the line itself, and the editing in War Room knows when to let that pause linger. Even the comedic timing is on point. Scenes with lighter moments, especially involving Miss Clara, rely on sharp cuts and smart rhythm. The editing doesn't milk the joke or cut it too early. It lets her deliver the punch, gives you a second to laugh, and then glides into the next moment. That kind of timing is what keeps the movie from ever feeling too heavy or one note. So while the film might not be sprinting or jumping through time, it's got a rhythm that pulls you in and keeps you there. The editing doesn't just move the story along, it guides it with care, matching the emotional heartbeat of the characters. Every transition, every cut, every lingering moment is like a step in a quiet dance of change. And before you know it, you're fully caught up in the flow. Let's talk about the soundtrack and score of War Room, because in a movie where the most epic battles are fought on the floor of a prayer closet, the music becomes more than just background noise. It becomes part of the emotional fabric. Right from the opening scenes, the score wraps itself around the story like a warm blanket or, at times, a ticking clock. It knows exactly when to whisper, when to swell, and when to step aside and let silence carry the weight. This is one of those films where the music isn't screaming at you. It's nudging you gently, saying, "Feel this moment, it matters." The composers knew they weren't scoring an action movie or a dramatic epic with explosions and high-speed chases. What they were scoring was heartache, transformation, conflict, and surrender. So, the music follows that arc perfectly. In the beginning, when Elizabeth and Tony's marriage feels strained and stiff, the score mirrors that tension. You'll notice it. The music is low, subtle, like something's hiding just beneath the surface. Doesn't try to do too much. It lets the silence of the home, The awkwardness between the characters takes center stage. That restraint. That's good storytelling through sound. But as the film moves forward and Elizabeth starts to change, when she steps into her war room, when she begins praying with fire, that's when the music shifts. Suddenly, you start to hear swelling strings, soft piano melodies, maybe a touch of gospel influence. These aren't just tunes floating in the background. They're like emotional undercurrents pulling you deeper. There's a recurring musical motif that follows Elizabeth's journey, and the more she prays, the stronger that motif becomes. It's like the music is growing with her, strengthening with every bold prayer and every step forward. Then there are those standout moments where the music and the message collide. One of the most memorable scenes is when Elizabeth walks through her house declaring truth, rebuking the enemy, and reclaiming her home. The score doesn't overpower the scene, it rides with it. The music builds, but it gives room for her voice, her strength, and her fire. You feel it rising inside you because the score is fueling that sense of breakthrough. It doesn't just support the scene, it lifts it. And we can't skip over the clever use of silence. Oh, the silence. Sometimes the absence of music says more than any orchestra could. In several scenes, especially the ones where Tony is reflecting, or when Miss Clara speaks a hard truth, the music vanishes. What you're left with is raw dialogue and the sound of a ticking clock, a door creaking, or just the stillness of a character's breath. That's a bold move and it works. Silence becomes a sound in itself. It holds the tension, makes the audience lean in, and lets the emotion settle in the gut. The film also makes smart choices with songs that complement the tone. There are moments of gospel-inspired tracks that bring a sense of hope and joy without being cheesy. They fit. They sound like something Miss Clara might hum while watering her plants or something that would echo through the halls of a community church after a big amen. These tracks bring personality and faith to the story. They aren't random drops for dramatic flair. They're woven into the DNA of the film. Even the transitions between scenes are scored with care. The music doesn't cut sharply or fade awkwardly. It flows, sometimes fading into the background as dialogue takes over, other times stepping up just as someone's breakthrough hits. When Tony begins his transformation, the music gives him dignity. When Elizabeth weeps, it gives her space. And when Miss Clara prays, the music practically kneels beside her. So the soundtrack and score in War Room don't just exist to fill space. They serve the story, the characters, and the spirit of the film. Whether through a delicate piano melody, a stirring gospel harmony, or complete, deliberate silence, the sound design shapes how we feel each beat of the journey. It's not loud. It's not trying to be the star. But it's felt. Deeply, consistently, and right on time. Alright, buckle in because when it comes to themes and messages, War Room is not playing around. This movie doesn't tiptoe around its message. It rolls up its sleeves, steps right into the room, a war room of course, and delivers it straight to your heart. The central theme is as bold as it is simple. Prayer is powerful. Not just a before-dinner prayer or a help me pass this test kind of thing. No, this is prayer as strategy, as battle plan, as full-on spiritual warfare. The film dives headfirst into the idea that the real fight isn't with your spouse, your boss, your bank account, or even yourself. The real battle is happening in the spiritual realm. And the way to win it? You hit your knees and go to war, with faith. That core idea drives everything in the film, and it's not treated like a side note. From the moment Miss Clara starts mentoring Elizabeth, you realize this isn't just about fixing a marriage. It's about completely rethinking how you fight your battles. The message is clear. When things fall apart, you don't just shout louder or point more fingers. You shut the door, clear out the distractions, and make space for some serious divine strategy. That's where the war room comes in. It's not just a closet with notes taped to the wall. It's a metaphor for turning inward, tuning into God, and taking your problems to the one who actually has the power to change things. But that's just the starting point. The film also dives into themes of forgiveness, redemption, and humility. Tony's character arc takes us on a deep dive into pride and its consequences. He's confident, successful, and totally blind to the damage he's doing to his family. But the movie doesn't just villainize him. It shows what happens when someone is confronted with the truth and chooses to change. That process isn't easy. It's messy. And the message here is that real transformation doesn't come from shame or fear. It comes from surrender. That's another major theme. The power of surrender. Not just in a passive give-up kind of way, but in an active, intentional release of control. Elizabeth has to let go of the urge to fix everything herself. Tony has to let go of his ego. Even Miss Clara, with all her wisdom, had to learn surrender in her own life before becoming the prayer warrior she is. It's a message that sneaks up on you and then grabs hold. Control is exhausting, but surrender can be liberating. The film also hits hard on the theme of legacy. Through the character of Danielle, Elizabeth and Tony's daughter, we see how the choices parents make ripple down into the next generation. It's not just about saving a marriage. It's about creating a home where faith is alive and love is intentional. When Danielle starts to smile more, interact with her parents differently, even throw a few sass-filled jokes of her own, you realize she's watching everything. That's the message. Your life is speaking even when you're not. What's it saying? There's also this beautiful thread of mentorship and discipleship woven throughout the film. Miss Clara doesn't just pray and hope for the best. She trains Elizabeth, equips her, calls her out and cheers her on. The message here is that we're not meant to fight alone. We need each other. We need wisdom passed down from people who've been through the fire and made it out stronger. And when we learn, we're supposed to pass it on. There's something powerful about that chain of faith, wisdom and support. It's not a solo mission. It's a legacy of strength. And let's not forget one more sneaky little theme, joy. Not the bubbly, always smiling kind, but the deep, grounded, unshakable kind that comes from knowing who's really in control. As things begin to shift in the Jordan household, you start to notice moments of lightness. Laughter returns. Peace settles in. That's the kind of joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's built on something stronger. And that, the film says, is the result of living a life that's aligned with truth, love, and purpose. So no, the themes in War Room aren't subtle. They're loud, clear, and unapologetically faith-driven. But they're not preachy in a hollow way. They're grounded in character, emotion, and real struggles. And by the end, you don't just understand the message. You feel it. Sticks. Challenges. It plants a seed that might just grow into your own war room someday. Alright, let's dive into the world of visual effects and CGI in War Room, a film that's more about the power of prayer than anything else. So, don't expect a ton of high-tech explosions or jaw-dropping computer-generated landscapes. But here's the thing. When the effects are used, they're subtle, they're intentional, and they fit right into the overall tone of the movie. This isn't a film that relies on flashy special effects to tell its story. It's more about using effects sparingly to enhance the experience when the story demands it. The digital effects in War Room are used in ways that make you feel like you're entering the spiritual realm, or sometimes, seeing things from a different perspective. One of the film's most memorable uses of visual effects is when the camera shows the impact of prayer. For example, when Elizabeth prays in the War Room, the film occasionally shifts to a slightly dreamy, almost ethereal visual quality, subtly emphasizing that what she's doing isn't just a quiet moment in a room, it's a spiritual battle. These moments aren't overly flashy or exaggerated. They're just enough to remind you that there's more at work than what's physically seen. The digital effects don't scream for attention. They support the message, making the abstract feel real without overwhelming you with unnecessary spectacle. Then there's the contrast between practical effects and digital work. Let's be honest. There's really not a whole lot of practical effects here in the traditional sense. No explosions, no physical stunts. The practical elements in War Room are mostly in the actors' performances, the set designs, and the way the camera moves. The War Room itself is a perfect example of practical, old-school set design. It's humble, cluttered, and personal. No need for a CGI backdrop when the space itself says so much about Elizabeth's spiritual journey. This is the kind of film where the most effective visual effects are the character interactions, the way light falls through the windows, or how the camera lingers on someone's face. There's no need for flashy CGI because the performances and the story are what really sell the atmosphere. When it comes to blending digital and practical elements, The balance is smooth. It's never jarring. You don't feel pulled out of the world of the film by an overuse of CGI. It's used like a seasoning, just enough to enhance the flavor but not so much that it takes over the dish. In scenes where Elizabeth's prayers seem to be shaking up her world, there's a soft visual shift that suggests a spiritual force is at work, but the world remains grounded. There's no need for anything wild or outlandish. The effect is subtle enough to feel like an added layer, not a distraction. One of the key moments where digital effects are used more noticeably is when Tony's character starts to confront his own spiritual battles. The CGI works with the emotional stakes of the scene, emphasizing the struggle he's facing in his own soul, but again, it doesn't pull focus. It's not about wow moments, it's about adding depth to the internal conflict. For the most part, War Room doesn't get bogged down by the need for overly complex visual effects. This isn't a movie that calls for them. The focus here is the spiritual journey, and the filmmakers smartly chose to keep things grounded in reality. The subtle, tasteful use of digital effects helps accentuate the emotional highs and lows of the characters without ever feeling like they're out of place. So, to sum it up, visual effects and CGI in War Room aren't the stars of the show. They're the supporting players that add just enough flair when necessary. They enhance the experience but never overshadow the heart of the film. The prayer, the transformation, and the raw, real moments of growth. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be in a film like this. When you step into the world of War Room, you quickly realize that the set design and locations are more than just backdrops. They're almost like silent characters in the story. The settings are intimate, personal, and grounded in the everyday lives of the characters, which makes the film feel so relatable. These aren't grand, sweeping landscapes or ultramodern settings. Instead, the film places us in ordinary homes, churches, and spaces that could be any of ours. And that's what makes it so powerful, because in these familiar places, something extraordinary is unfolding. Take the War Room itself, for example. The room isn't much to look at first glance. It's just a small closet with a few shelves of books, a worn chair, and walls covered in handwritten notes and prayer requests. It's cluttered and unpolished, but that's what gives it character. It's raw, real, and untouched by pretense. The War Room becomes the heart of the film, a sacred space where Elizabeth and Miss Clara wage their spiritual battles. The room's humble design contrasts beautifully with the powerful spiritual work that happens inside it. It doesn't need to be fancy or sleek. It's the simplicity of it that makes it feel authentic and grounded in reality. The house where Elizabeth and Tony live also adds a lot to the film's sense of realism. It's a cozy suburban home, nothing too extravagant, but it feels lived in. You can tell that it's a place that's seen both good times and bad. The home is a visual metaphor for their marriage. A bit worn, a bit disjointed, but still full of potential for redemption. The cracks in the walls and the clutter in the living room aren't just set dressing. They tell the story of a couple trying to hold it all together, even as their relationship unravels. The home feels like a microcosm of the bigger emotional battles going on in the characters' lives. The church settings also play a key role in the film. While the church itself isn't a major focal point, the locations within it offer moments of reflection and growth for the characters. The church feels like a sanctuary, a place for people to come together and reset. It's calm, peaceful, and a visual contrast to the chaos in the characters' personal lives. Whether it's a prayer meeting or a quiet moment of reflection, the church settings provide the perfect backdrop for spiritual healing, and you can almost feel the weight of each prayer as it echoes in the empty halls. Even the outdoor locations are used strategically to set the tone. From the suburban streets to the wide-open fields, the outdoor scenes often carry a sense of freedom and possibility. There's a feeling that these characters could go anywhere, do anything, but it's within the walls of their homes, their hearts, and their relationships that the real work has to be done. The film doesn't rely on sweeping vistas or dramatic landscapes. Instead, it uses the simplicity of everyday life to its advantage, making the audience feel like these struggles and triumphs could happen to anyone. And let's not overlook the props. Those little details that make the world feel authentic. From the sticky notes in the War Room to the worn-out Bibles and prayer journals, every prop is a reminder that this journey is deeply personal. The cluttered papers on the walls of the war room tell the story of each prayer, each battle fought. The small touches, like the coffee cup sitting on the kitchen counter or the family photos on the wall, help to create a sense of normalcy, making the characters' struggles feel real. There's nothing too fancy or stylized about the props, and that's the point. Everything in the film feels intentional, but in a way that doesn't draw attention to itself. It's all about making the world feel lived in and authentic. Ultimately, the settings and production design in War Room do more than just set the stage for the action. They add depth to the story. The locations aren't just places where things happen. They reflect the emotional and spiritual journeys of the characters. Every room, every prop, every piece of furniture is a part of the larger story of redemption, and they help to create a world that's as real and relatable as the struggles we all face in our own lives. Whether it's the small, cluttered war room or the peaceful calm of the church, the settings in War Room serve as both a literal and metaphorical space for transformation, growth, and, ultimately, hope. If there's one thing War Room nails, it's dialogue that feels like it's coming straight from the heart. The script doesn't just deliver lines. It delivers truths. And these aren't your run-of-the-mill, forgettable lines you hear in every other movie. The dialogue in this film cuts to the core of human experience, dealing with real struggles like marriage, faith, and forgiveness. Whether it's a fiery sermon or a whispered prayer, the script stays true to the emotional weight it's trying to convey. There's a beauty in the way the characters speak to each other, especially between Elizabeth and Miss Clara. Their conversations are more than just exchanges of words. They're mentorship, guidance, and soul-searching. Miss Clara's lines, in particular, are laced with wisdom that goes beyond the surface. When she talks about spiritual warfare or the importance of prayer, there's this quiet intensity that makes her words linger long after she says them. One of the standout moments is when she tells Elizabeth, "You can't do this alone, Elizabeth. You need help, and you need to be willing to fight." It's not just a line, it's a challenge. It's the kind of dialogue that wakes you up, makes you realize that change is hard but necessary. Then there's Elizabeth, who starts off unsure of herself, but as she grows in her faith, her words begin to carry more weight. Her lines about forgiveness and trusting in God feel like they come from a place of real growth, and you can hear the shift in her tone as she moves from skepticism to conviction. The dialogue here doesn't shy away from being blunt. In one particularly intense moment, when she confronts Tony, she says, "I don't want to be in a marriage that's only held together by lies." It's not poetic, but it's raw, and it cuts deep. The script doesn't shy away from moments of tension and real-life emotional honesty. It's these moments that add such authenticity to the dialogue. Tony, on the other hand, has some of the more sharply written moments in the film, especially when his character starts to break down the walls he's built around himself. One of the most impactful lines comes when he admits, "I've been so focused on my career, I forgot what I was really fighting for." It's simple, but it hits hard because it's the moment he realizes that success at work doesn't matter if he's failing in his personal life. The script gives him that realization, and the dialogue carries the weight of his transformation. There are also lighter, yet still significant, moments where the dialogue adds depth through humor or warmth. Miss Clara's quick wit adds some much-needed lightness in the film, making her wisdom more accessible. She has this no-nonsense approach to life, but her humor shines through, making her feel approachable. The way she teases Elizabeth about learning how to pray is funny, but also a gentle nudge toward self-awareness. It's moments like these that balance out the heavier themes and give the script a more rounded feel. And then, of course, the prayer scenes. The dialogue in these moments isn't just about what's being said, it's about how it's being said. There's power in the way Elizabeth and Miss Clara express their faith, and the script captures that with such sincerity. These moments feel less like scripted lines and more like deep conversations with the divine. "God, you know the fight I'm in," Elizabeth prays in one scene, and in those words, you hear all the desperation, faith, and hope she's trying to convey. Simple but profoundly moving. The script is smart in the way it uses these quieter, reflective moments to balance the bigger dramatic scenes. It's never over the top or melodramatic. The dialogue feels grounded, real, and relatable, which is part of why the film's message resonates so strongly. Even in the most tense, emotionally charged moments, the lines never feel forced. Everything is timed just right, with emotional depth that feels earned, not scripted for effect. The script doesn't just deliver dialogue, it delivers understanding, growth, and moments of clarity that define the journey of the characters. Ultimately, War Room doesn't need a ton of fancy words or witty one-liners. It just needs the kind of dialogue that speaks to the heart, and that's exactly what the script does. Whether it's the hard truths, the moments of faith, or the quiet reflections, the lines in this film stick with you, long after the credits roll. It's a script that makes you feel like you've been on a journey with the characters, not just watching them from the outside. And that's a rare gift. When you think of a drama, particularly one with themes of faith and personal transformation, you might expect a pretty standard formula. Emotional confrontations, slow-burning character arcs, and a feel-good resolution. But War Room doesn't just follow that script. It twists things up a bit, leaning into its genre but with a unique spin that makes it stand out from the typical faith-based films you might be used to. At first glance, it looks like it's following the genre conventions of the family drama. You've got your central marital conflict, a struggling couple, and a wise mentor guiding the protagonist towards spiritual growth. But what's clever here is how the film introduces the idea of prayer and spiritual warfare as an actual strategy to resolve the conflict. Instead of characters facing physical obstacles or external villains, their primary battle is internal, and the way the film uses prayer as a weapon to fight that battle is a refreshing take within the genre. It could have easily fallen into the trap of turning prayer into a passive activity, something that just offers comfort rather than actively moving the story forward. Instead, the film turns it into a powerful tool. You've got Miss Clara, who acts almost like a coach, preparing Elizabeth for the spiritual fight of her life. The war room itself becomes a metaphor for tactical planning, where prayer isn't just a comfort, but a strategy, something you can actively use to change your life. This subverts the usual genre conventions by introducing an almost military approach to spiritual warfare, which is both fresh and unexpected. Of course, the film doesn't completely abandon the genre norms. There's still the emotional drama, the tear-jerking moments, and the redemption arc you expect from a feel-good drama. But it does something really clever with the pacing and the structure. It doesn't rely on a heavy dose of action or dramatic confrontations. Instead, it builds the tension slowly through quiet, introspective moments, allowing the characters to evolve gradually. And when those emotional climaxes do hit, they hit hard, but in a more understated way. There's no big explosion or explosive argument. The tension comes from watching Elizabeth wrestle with her faith, her marriage, and her own shortcomings, which makes her transformation all the more powerful. Then there's the humor, which comes at just the right moments. Miss Clara's no-nonsense attitude and sharp wit offer a nice counterbalance to the more serious drama. It's like she's the comic relief but with a purpose. Her humor isn't there to undercut the drama, but to provide levity and a little bit of wisdom. She doesn't need to deliver a punchline for it to land. Her lines are layered with truth, and the humor feels like a natural extension of her character. It's also a nice break from all the emotional heaviness, which makes the serious moments hit even harder. Suspense in War Room doesn't follow the traditional action thriller mold, but it's there in its own unique form. Instead of building suspense around external events or conflicts, it creates tension around the internal journeys of its characters. Every prayer session, every quiet moment of reflection, builds a kind of emotional suspense. Will Elizabeth find the courage to confront her husband? Will Tony open his eyes and realize what he's been missing? The stakes are high, but they're all about personal transformation. The suspense isn't about what will happen, but how these characters will change. It's a different kind of tension, but one that still keeps you hooked. And then there's the genre-bending aspect of how War Room incorporates elements of spiritual and faith-based storytelling into a dramatic structure. Faith-based films can sometimes feel a bit preachy or too overt in their messaging, but this one balances it with a level of subtlety. It's not about hitting you over the head with sermons. It's about showing the power of prayer through real-life struggles. The film doesn't shy away from showing the difficulty of change, and it makes the spiritual journey feel accessible and tangible. Instead of being a simple good versus evil battle, it's more of a struggle within story, which gives it a depth that you don't always see in the genre. All in all, War Room doesn't follow the conventional genre playbook, but it knows exactly how to use the genre's elements to its advantage. It takes the familiar conventions of family drama and spiritual transformation and gives them a fresh spin by focusing on the power of prayer and the internal battles we all face. The film never forces its themes or messages. It lets them unfold naturally, with just enough action, humor, drama, and suspense to keep you engaged. It's a perfect example of how a film can embrace its genre while still doing something new and unique within it. War Room isn't just about relationships or faith. It's a film that subtly but powerfully dives into the social and cultural fabric of contemporary life. It doesn't make grand political statements or point fingers at societal ills, but it definitely speaks to some of the underlying issues that people face today, especially in the context of marriage, family dynamics, and the role of faith in personal transformation. At its core, the film tackles the issue of the fractured family unit. In today's society, where divorce rates are high, and families often face tremendous stress due to career demands, financial pressures, and personal struggles, War Room offers a reflection of that reality. It doesn't gloss over the messiness of relationships or pretend that everything will be okay with a simple prayer. Instead, it suggests that restoration requires hard work, vulnerability, and a commitment to something bigger than ourselves. Elizabeth and Tony's strained marriage is the heart of the film, and their journey speaks to a larger cultural narrative about the challenges of modern relationships. It's easy to throw in the towel when things get tough, and the film makes a quiet commentary about the tendency to give up too soon. The solution isn't always easy or quick, but the film shows that with faith, prayer, and commitment, healing is possible. The role of women in the film also provides an interesting cultural commentary. Miss Clara, as the wise, strong, and assertive character who challenges Elizabeth, represents a more traditional and grounded view of womanhood. She's not afraid to speak her mind or tell Elizabeth what she needs to hear, even if it's uncomfortable. In a modern world where women are often expected to juggle multiple roles, Miss Clara's character reminds us that strength doesn't always come from external achievements or societal validation. It comes from inner strength, wisdom, and the ability to persevere through adversity. She's a reminder that true empowerment isn't just about fighting for what's yours in the world. It's about being rooted in something deeper, like faith and purpose. This theme resonates in a time when women's roles and expectations are still being debated in society. The film also speaks to the idea of personal responsibility versus blaming external forces. In many ways, the characters in War Room, especially Elizabeth, begin their journey by blaming their problems on their circumstances or on their spouse. But as the story unfolds, they come to realize that true change begins with self-reflection. This theme of taking personal responsibility for one's actions and attitudes is particularly relevant in a culture where it's often easier to blame others or external factors for personal struggles. The film gently pushes back against that mentality, encouraging individuals to look inward and do the hard work required to change. Faith is also a significant cultural element that War Room presents with a quiet but bold statement. In a society where religion can often be pushed to the margins or portrayed as outdated or irrelevant, the film presents faith as an active, transformative force in people's lives. It shows that faith isn't just about going to church or following a set of rituals. It's about actively engaging in the process of prayer and trusting that it can change your circumstances, your relationships, and your heart. In a world where people are constantly searching for meaning, the film offers a glimpse into a way of living that believes in the power of prayer, not as a passive act, but as a proactive, life-changing force. And while the film is deeply rooted in Christian faith, it doesn't feel preachy or out of touch with reality. It integrates these themes in a way that feels organic to the story and characters. The cultural commentary doesn't feel forced. It's woven seamlessly into the narrative. The way the characters talk about faith, relationships, and family is natural, as if they're having a conversation with you, rather than delivering a sermon. This allows the film to resonate with a wide audience, whether or not they share the same religious background. There's also a subtle commentary on modern consumerism and the pressures of work-life balance. The characters in War Room are all grappling with the demands of their jobs, and the film draws a sharp line between success at work and success at home. Tony's career-focused mindset is shown as a contributing factor to the breakdown in his marriage. It's a critique of a culture that often elevates professional success above personal well-being, particularly the well-being of family and relationships. The film suggests that without a solid foundation in the home and in personal values, all the external achievements are hollow. In a way, War Room acts as a reminder to slow down, reevaluate priorities, and refocus on what truly matters. The cultural commentary isn't in your face. It's subtle and woven into the character's growth. It asks us to look at how our society's values affect our personal lives, and whether we're truly living with purpose, or simply going through the motions. The film encourages introspection without feeling preachy, offering a solution in the form of spiritual renewal, but without being preachy about it. It's a delicate balance that the film handles well, providing viewers with something meaningful to think about without alienating them. All in all, War Room tackles contemporary issues like marriage struggles, personal responsibility, women's empowerment, and the role of faith in modern life with grace and authenticity. It might not be overtly political, but its social and cultural commentary is still highly relevant, offering a quiet critique of some of the pressures and issues that define today's world. War Room is one of those films that really knows how to tug at your heartstrings and make you think. It's not flashy or filled with dramatic plot twists, but it digs deep into emotions that everyone can relate to. Love, forgiveness, faith, and the everyday struggles that make us question our choices. And it does all of this in such a way that, if you're not careful, it might just sneak up on you and hit you with a gut punch of emotional truth when you least expect it. Let's talk about the moments that will definitely elicit strong reactions. There's this scene early in the film where Elizabeth and Tony have a major confrontation, and it's one of those gut-wrenching real-life moments where both characters are standing at a crossroads. You can feel the weight of everything they've been avoiding crashing down on them. The silence, the tension, and the raw emotion in their voices make you almost hold your breath. It's not just the words they say, but the pain behind them. That scene alone could make even the toughest person pause and reflect on their own relationships. You can't help but feel for them, and it stirs up all the emotions of regret, guilt, and longing for redemption. Then there's Miss Clara, who offers both wisdom and tough love in equal doses. Her character has these beautifully quiet moments where she says just the right thing at the right time. It's those lines that sneak up on you and make you feel like someone just opened a window to your soul. For instance, when Miss Clara tells Elizabeth, "You've got to pray for him. You've got to love him through it." The simplicity of that line lands with such weight. It's the kind of advice you didn't realize you needed, and you might find yourself thinking about it long after the movie's over. It invites reflection, especially on the power of prayer, love, and patience in real life. But don't get too comfortable with the heartstrings being pulled, because the film knows how to balance all that emotional weight with moments of levity. Miss Clara has this sharp wit that gives the film a lightheartedness it desperately needs at times. Her humor doesn't just serve as comic relief. It's part of the film's way of getting you invested in these characters. You end up loving her, not just because of her wisdom, but because of the playful banter she shares with Elizabeth. It's the perfect way to break up the emotional intensity, and when Miss Clara cracks a smile or delivers a zinger, it'll make you chuckle, even if just for a second. You realize that even in the darkest moments, humor is part of healing and moving forward. Now, if you're the type who loves a good plot twist or a shocking moment, War Room may not offer the kind of wow factor that comes with surprise twists. But there is an element of suspense that builds throughout the film, especially in the form of personal growth and emotional breakthroughs. There's this slow, simmering feeling that something big is about to happen, and when it does, it's not some grand external event, but rather a quiet shift in the characters themselves. You'll find yourself rooting for them, hoping they'll make that turn toward reconciliation, and that investment keeps you engaged in a way that doesn't require constant action or suspense. It's emotional tension, but it feels earned, and when the breakthrough happens, it feels all the more satisfying. As for repeat viewings, War Room isn't a film you watch just for the surface-level plot. It's the kind of movie that invites you to revisit it, partly because the messages it conveys are profound, and partly because the subtle layers of character development are something you may not fully catch the first time. The film's reflections on faith, marriage, and forgiveness offer something to ponder long after the credits roll. It doesn't beat you over the head with its themes, so you might find yourself thinking about the way the characters evolve and how it mirrors aspects of your own life. It's one of those films that lingers in your thoughts, and if you watch it again, you'll find new insights that you didn't notice the first time. And if you happen to be in a conversation about relationships or faith or even the struggles that come with trying to change, War Room might just come up. It's the kind of movie that sparks discussion about what it means to love unconditionally, to keep fighting for something when it seems like the odds are stacked against you, and to believe in something greater than yourself. These are universal themes that, at the very least, will make you want to share the movie with someone else so they can experience the same emotional journey. Overall, War Room is one of those films that sticks with you. It taps into the heart of real-life struggles with relationships, forgiveness, and personal growth. And it does so in such a way that you can't help but feel deeply connected to the characters. Whether it's through tears of frustration, moments of joy, or moments of quiet contemplation, the film resonates emotionally, creating an experience that feels genuine and lasting. It invites not just emotional engagement, but thoughtful reflection long after you've seen it. And that's the magic of it. The movie doesn't just ask for your attention, it asks for your heart. When you stack War Room up against other films in the faith-based drama genre, it definitely holds its own, but it's not necessarily doing anything revolutionary. It's very much in line with the types of movies you'd expect from the genre, like Fireproof or Courageous, in terms of themes about marriage, family, and personal transformation. These films all have a common thread. They focus on how faith can provide the answers to life's most complicated problems. So, in that sense, War Room follows a well-trodden path, but what makes it stand out is how deeply it dives into the personal and relational aspects of its characters, particularly through the dynamic between Elizabeth and Tony. It's not just a movie about people learning to pray. It's about how prayer changes people, shifts relationships, and inspires action. That's where it carves out a slightly new lane. Rather than focusing on large, dramatic, life-altering moments that we often see in similar films, War Room takes a much more intimate approach. The way the movie unfolds with these small, subtle shifts in the characters' hearts is where it stands apart. While other films in the genre may rely on grand gestures or climactic moments, War Room is more about the slow, transformative power of prayer and personal reflection. Looking at director Alex Kendrick's filmography, there's a noticeable consistency in the type of stories he's telling. Kendrick, known for his work on films like Facing the Giants and Courageous, seems to favor narratives that blend personal struggles with faith-based solutions. War Room is no different in that respect. Kendrick's focus is often on characters facing seemingly insurmountable challenges, whether in their careers, marriages, or faith, and showing how faith and personal commitment can turn things around. However, what's different about War Room is the tone. There's a sense of quiet, reflective drama here that feels less like a preachy sermon and more like an invitation to explore faith in real, messy ways. In that sense, Kendrick is refining his approach, moving from bold, large-scale moral lessons to something more nuanced and introspective. Now let's talk about the genre as a whole. Faith-based films often get a bad rap for being overly sentimental or predictable. War Room certainly treads some familiar territory in terms of its formula. Relationships in crisis, an older mentor with wisdom to share, a big emotional breakthrough. But it doesn't rely solely on that formula for its impact. Instead of simply offering easy answers or resolutions, the film dares to explore the messy realities of relationships and marriage. It's a bit more grounded than some other faith-based dramas that might feel overly idealistic or simplistic. And while the formula is still there, it's the way War Room handles the emotional beats that makes it stand out. It's not all wrapped up in a bow by the end. There's real work that has to be done for healing to take place, and that gives it a level of depth that is often missing in the genre. In comparison to some of the major franchises that also explore themes of personal growth and transformation, like The Pursuit of Happiness or The Blind Side, War Room stands on its own in terms of its focus on faith. While both of those films also deal with personal struggles and overcoming adversity, they don't delve into the spiritual aspect in quite the same way. War Room, in that regard, is deeply anchored in the idea that prayer is not just a tool for solving problems, but a way of life that requires full commitment and trust. This makes it more niche, appealing specifically to viewers who value faith as an integral part of the transformation process. It's also one of the more low-key films in terms of action or spectacle, which is refreshing. In a world of blockbuster hits and high-octane thrillers, War Room focuses on what many might consider small things, like prayer, family conversations, and personal breakthroughs. But those things, when done right, are often what resonate the most. If we're comparing War Room to other films in the Christian film landscape, it's safe to say it's one of the stronger ones, in terms of how it resonates emotionally. Unlike some other movies that can feel preachy or overly manufactured, this film's ability to mix warmth, humor, and vulnerability is a welcome change. It doesn't just preach at its audience. It invites them into the characters' lives and struggles, which makes the ultimate resolution feel earned. Now, looking outside the Christian genre, it doesn't necessarily break any new ground when compared to more mainstream dramas about personal transformation. Films like The Pursuit of Happiness or even A Beautiful Mind share similar themes of perseverance, change, and overcoming the odds. However, the major difference is in the vehicle of transformation. War Room uses prayer and faith as the central means of change, whereas those films often rely on self-motivation or external factors. The emphasis on spirituality is both what makes it unique and, at times, what may limit its broader appeal. But within the genre, it holds a strong position because of its sincerity and the way it handles its themes without coming across as overly contrived. The performances in War Room elevate it in a way that makes it more than just a formulaic story. While it might not offer anything radically new in terms of genre expectations, it delivers a more personal, relatable experience that doesn't feel like it's just going through the motions. This makes it stand out in a crowded field of faith-based films, and in the end, it's the authenticity of its characters and the sincerity of its message that really sets it apart from others in the same genre. In War Room, the symbolism is subtle but powerful, woven into the fabric of the story in a way that enriches the narrative without being too on the nose. One of the most obvious symbols throughout the film is the War Room itself. On the surface, it's a small, cluttered closet, a space that seems far from anything significant. But when you dig deeper, that little room becomes the epicenter of transformation. It's where the real battles take place, not in the external world, but in the hearts and minds of the characters. The War Room represents the power of prayer, the place where Elizabeth can retreat from the chaos of her life and focus her energy on what really matters. It's a metaphor for the internal struggle we all face when trying to overcome personal challenges. The physical space reflects the mental and emotional space that needs to be cleared for change to happen. Then there's the imagery of battles and fighting, but not in the conventional sense. The movie is filled with references to fighting, but the conflict is not one of physical violence or external enemies. Instead, it's about fighting the spiritual battles within. The very title War Room is a metaphor in itself, reminding us that the greatest victories often happen on a personal, internal level. There's this recurring image of people going to war, but the weapons they wield aren't guns or swords. They're prayers, and their strategy involves faith and belief. This is a constant reminder of the power of prayer, how it can serve as an armor for personal struggles, and how faith can be a battlefield where the heart and soul find healing. The mirror that Elizabeth keeps in her home is another metaphor that's easy to overlook but adds a lot of depth to the story. In the early scenes, Elizabeth is grappling with her reflection, both physically and emotionally. The mirror becomes a symbol of self-reflection. It's her way of looking at herself, evaluating her choices, and seeing what she's become. In one of the film's key moments, she's forced to literally face her reflection, confront the way she's been living her life, and come to terms with her role in the breakdown of her marriage. This mirror scene is so layered because it shows the internal struggle of a person coming to grips with their own mistakes and learning to change. It's the turning point where Elizabeth's growth is solidified. She stops just looking at the surface and starts seeing what lies beneath. The recurring use of doors throughout the film also carries a symbolic weight. Doors are a metaphor for transitions, choices, and new beginnings. When Elizabeth opens the door to her war room, it marks the beginning of her transformation. It's not just a physical door she's opening, but a doorway to a new way of thinking, a fresh perspective on her marriage, and an invitation to let faith take control. There's also the moment when Tony literally walks out the door, symbolizing his exit from the marriage, but later in the film, the door reopens, signifying his return and the potential for reconciliation. These doorways represent the characters' agency in their own stories, where they have the power to either shut the door on hope or open it to new possibilities. Then there's the recurring theme of light and darkness. Throughout the film, there are moments when the characters are surrounded by darkness, either in their personal lives or in their relationship with God. But there are also moments when light shines through, whether it's in the form of a revelation, a prayer being answered, or a simple act of kindness. The visual contrast between light and dark isn't just about the physical settings. It's a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment versus confusion, clarity versus doubt. The film uses light as a sign of hope and redemption, suggesting that even in the darkest times, there's a way out through faith. Miss Clara, too, carries a wealth of symbolic meaning. She's not just a character. She represents wisdom and spiritual guidance. When she advises Elizabeth to pray for Tony and fight for her marriage, she's essentially serving as a vessel for the film's overarching theme, that through perseverance, faith, and prayer, people can overcome even the toughest battles. She is the guide, the mentor, the embodiment of the idea that change is possible if you're willing to fight for it on a spiritual level. Miss Clara's role in the story is also symbolized by her old house. While it's humble and worn down, it serves as a metaphor for her inner strength and spiritual foundation. The home may be simple, but it's strong in faith, much like her character. As the story progresses, we also see clutter and chaos being symbols of Elizabeth's life spiraling out of control. Her home is full of disarray, mirroring the emotional mess she's living in. As she clears out the clutter in her physical space and begins to reorganize her life through prayer, the transformation is more than just external. It's a reflection of her inner work. The clutter she tackles becomes a visual cue for the emotional chaos she's trying to manage. It's as if clearing the physical space is directly tied to clearing her heart and mind. In terms of sound and imagery, War Room doesn't lean on heavy, grandiose symbolism. It doesn't need to. Instead, it uses simple, yet profound visual cues to enrich the storytelling. The recurring motifs of doors, mirrors, light, darkness, and physical spaces all serve to support the film's themes of faith, transformation, and the internal battles we face. They're not just there for decoration. They're tools that the filmmakers use to make the audience feel the characters' journeys in a visceral way. These elements may seem small, but they are expertly threaded into the narrative, turning the film into more than just a story about a family. It becomes a universal tale of personal growth, hope, and the quiet, everyday battles that define us. War Room doesn't necessarily take on grand historical events or complex time periods like some period dramas, but what it excels at is making its portrayal of real-life struggles feel deeply immersive and authentic. It's rooted in the everyday, and that's where its power lies, within the mundane moments that reflect real, relatable experiences. The film doesn't need sweeping historical references or elaborate set designs to bring the audience into its world. Instead, it taps into the emotional realism of family dynamics, personal struggles, and the transformative power of faith. The way the film presents the struggles of the main characters, Elizabeth and Tony, feels like it could be happening next door. It's not a far-off fantasy world where problems are neatly packaged with clear-cut resolutions. Instead, you see the crumbling marriage, the tension-filled moments, and the small but impactful daily decisions that shape their lives. Whether it's the hustle of everyday life, the pressure of work, or the subtle strain of a relationship on the brink, the film thrives on its immersive depiction of what many people experience in their own homes and marriages. What makes this approach particularly engaging is how the filmmakers take ordinary, everyday spaces, homes, offices, kitchens, and make them come alive with meaning. The house Elizabeth lives in is a key location in the film, and it's not some sprawling high-tech mansion. It's a regular middle-class home, full of clutter and wear. That's part of the immersion. The audience can immediately relate to the idea of a space that's seen better days, just like Elizabeth's marriage. The War Room, that unassuming closet, is the standout example of this grounding in the real world. It's not some pristine, idealized spiritual space. It's a messy, humble room that reflects the chaos of life, Yet it becomes the heart of the transformation, an incredibly relatable metaphor for anyone looking to find a moment of clarity amid personal turmoil. What's fascinating is how the film handles time. The pacing isn't about rushing through life's problems. Instead, it carefully unfolds, giving space for moments of reflection, growth, and discovery. It's not about showing years of history or dramatic shifts, but rather it makes each day count. The sense of time in War Room feels very real, as if we're walking through the weeks and months of Elizabeth's journey with her. Small victories and challenges happen in real time, and there's an authenticity in the way these moments play out that makes the audience feel like they're living through them too. The film's portrayal of prayer, too, is completely grounded in real-life practices. There's nothing fantastical or overly dramatic about how prayer is depicted. It's not shown as an instant miracle, but rather as a quiet, consistent practice that starts to make a difference, little by little. The immersion comes from the sincerity with which it treats the act of prayer. The film doesn't rely on supernatural elements to show the change in the characters. It's all about the real emotional shifts that come from trusting in something bigger than oneself. This feels like something many viewers could relate to, especially if they've ever experienced the slow and steady power of faith in their own lives. The film's treatment of relationships is also immersive in its portrayal of how real people change over time. Elizabeth's emotional journey isn't one of instant transformation but one that comes through persistence, introspection, and gradual acceptance of her role in the challenges she faces. Her transformation happens because she takes real, tangible steps, by changing her mindset, by finding strength in prayer, and by making small decisions that reflect her growth. The film takes its time with this, showing the hard, often awkward conversations that happen between her and Tony. It's not a quick fix, and the movie never treats it like one. This adds a sense of realism that makes the entire experience feel more like a shared reality with the characters. When it comes to how the film tackles faith, it doesn't feel preachy or out of touch. Instead, it finds ways to weave faith into everyday moments. For example, the act of Elizabeth praying in her war room isn't depicted as a dramatic, over-the-top spectacle. Instead, it's quiet and personal. There's a peacefulness in these scenes, and that helps bring the audience into the experience with her. The pacing of these moments is slow enough to allow the viewer to feel that same stillness, that sense of reflection. It's not a grand, sweeping religious experience. It's a very grounded, intimate one that makes you believe that this could happen in any home, in any town. While War Room doesn't tackle historical events or fantastical worlds, it nails the immersive quality of real life, taps into the everyday struggles, the emotional battles, and the small, incremental changes that make all the difference. The real-world grounding of the film's settings, characters, and actions allows the audience to step right into the shoes of Elizabeth, Tony, and Miss Clara. There's no need for a historical backdrop or an elaborate period setting because the world the characters inhabit feels like it's just like theirs, just like ours. And that's what makes it so engaging. It's not just a movie you watch. It's one you experience with them. Let's talk numbers and how the magic of War Room came to life on screen with its relatively modest budget. For a film that's focused on heartfelt moments, prayer, and personal transformation rather than big explosions or high-end special effects, the production quality is surprisingly polished. With a budget of about $3 million, War Room proves that you don't need a massive financial backing to create an impactful movie. The filmmakers clearly worked with what they had, and you can see the investment in the important areas. Solid performances, a strong script, and a meaningful message, all while keeping the visuals grounded and relatable. There weren't grand sets or extravagant effects, and that was entirely by design. The focus was on the story, not on creating a visually extravagant world, which suited the film perfectly. Now, here's the kicker. War Room wasn't just a success in terms of production. It was a massive financial win. Despite its small budget, the film went on to gross over $74 million worldwide. That's a crazy return on investment, considering how low the budget was in comparison to its box office haul. It became one of the highest-grossing faith-based films of its time, which caught a lot of people by surprise, including Hollywood insiders who didn't expect such a simple, faith-driven story to make such a huge impact. The film resonated deeply with audiences, especially those who were looking for something spiritually uplifting, and that was a huge part of its box office success. A lot of the success can be attributed to War Room's strong marketing strategy. The film was released by Sony's Affirm Films, a division that specializes in faith-based movies, and they knew exactly who to target. The marketing focused heavily on the emotional and spiritual aspects of the film, creating trailers and promotional material that emphasized the personal growth and transformation the characters would undergo. This resonated well with Christian audiences, who were looking for a movie that spoke to their values and beliefs, but the film's universal themes of love, hope, and second chances reached beyond just one demographic. It created a buzz, and word of mouth quickly spread as audiences shared how it made them feel, something that is invaluable when it comes to box office performance. While the film's success was largely driven by its core audience, it still managed to break out of its niche and find success beyond the faith-based film community. It showed that there's a market for movies that center on faith, family, and personal growth, without relying on action-packed sequences or high-budget spectacle. The success wasn't just about the money it made. It was about how it connected with people on an emotional level. However, marketing wasn't just about reaching religious viewers. It was also about showing that War Room wasn't just a Christian film in the traditional sense. It had a universal appeal, with themes of redemption, forgiveness, and overcoming personal struggles that anyone could relate to. The marketing team really leaned into that broader message, which helped expand the film's audience. Critics and some moviegoers may not have expected much from a film with such a modest budget, but War Room proved them wrong in a big way. It's a prime example of how a well-crafted story, a clear vision, and effective marketing can turn a film with a small budget into a box office triumph. The film's financial success wasn't just about numbers. It was a reflection of how deeply it resonated with viewers who were looking for something that spoke to their values, gave them hope, and left them feeling uplifted. It's a classic underdog story in the film industry, where a low-budget, high-heart movie defied the odds and made a massive impact at the box office. If you're wondering where to watch War Room, you have a few different options to dive into this uplifting story. While the film originally hit theaters in 2015, you won't have to wait for a re-release to catch it. These days, War Room is available through a variety of platforms that make it easy to enjoy from the comfort of your own home. Whether you're in the mood for a digital rental, a stream on one of the popular services, or even just a good old-fashioned DVD, there's no shortage of ways to access this gem. First up, for those who love streaming, War Room can be found on services like Amazon Prime Video, where you can either rent or buy it. It's also available on various platforms like YouTube and Google Play Movies, where you can rent or purchase it directly. This is a great option for anyone who loves the flexibility of watching movies on demand, at their own pace, and from whatever device they prefer, whether that's on a TV, laptop, or even your phone. If you're someone who enjoys watching movies as part of a subscription package, War Room is sometimes included with certain streaming services like Netflix or Hulu, depending on your region and time of year. These platforms tend to rotate their movie catalogs, so you might find it readily available one month and not the next, but keep an eye on it because it pops up quite often. Having it available for streaming on your favorite platform means you can access it whenever the mood strikes without worrying about additional fees. For those of us who still enjoy the tactile experience of popping in a DVD or Blu-ray, War Room is available in physical form at most retail stores or through online retailers like Amazon. There's something about having a copy of a film you love on hand, especially for those who want to create a movie night that's all about family, faith, and reflection. Plus, if you're someone who enjoys the bonus features, the DVD often includes behind-the-scenes content, interviews with the cast, and other fun extras that give you more insight into the film's creation. But what's the best way to watch War Room for the fullest impact? It really depends on your vibe. If you want to capture the magic of the film the way audiences originally experienced it, there's something special about watching it in a shared space with others, whether that's in a living room, a church hall, or even a small gathering. The communal feel of the movie, especially the moments of prayer, transformation, and personal growth, hits differently when you're surrounded by others. You can experience the collective reaction to the emotional highs and lows as they unfold. On the flip side, if you're someone who appreciates a more reflective and personal experience, watching War Room alone could allow you to really connect with the themes on a deeper level. This is a film that invites you to think about your own life, your relationships, and your personal faith, so having the time and space to process those ideas at your own pace could make a huge impact. Watching it on a smaller screen like a tablet or phone might be a more intimate setting for those quiet, introspective moments when you find yourself contemplating what the characters are going through. Whether you're streaming it from a platform or going old school with a DVD, the real key to enjoying War Room to its fullest is to lean into its heart. It's a movie that's meant to be experienced with an open heart and a willingness to reflect. So, no matter how you choose to watch it, make sure you're in a space where you can really absorb the journey of transformation and the quiet power of prayer. You'll walk away from it feeling like you've gone through something meaningful. And that's the beauty of how this film connects with its audience.